Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. So what are we doing today? Today, let's start off like this. I am obsessed with lists. I have been obsessed with lists for quite a long time. And I remember there was a moment in college when I was reading Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and he talked about the significance of a list. A list is a representation that our future selves won't remember what our current selves want. And so we need a list in order to remind our future selves that this is what our current self wants and needs, like a grocery list, even a wish list. And wish lists are funny because our tastes and our desires change so much that sometimes when you look back on an old wish list, you just look and point at it and laugh. Because it's just so silly. And so lists have just played a huge and important role in my life. I'm not necessarily a list maker now, but I do take huge satisfaction in looking at a well-curated, well-thought-through list, and I can definitely appreciate a really, really good list. And so we're going to be talking about a great list today, and it is the Library of Congress, Books That Shaped America. This is an exhibit, an online exhibit. Actually, if you can't access it online, can you please let me know? And it was curated and put together by the Library of Congress, which is like the pinnacle of information and information storage and retrieval. These books, according to the Library of Congress, are books by American authors that provoked thought, controversy, and change throughout American history. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment on some of the titles that I've read or that I own or that stood out to me in some way. The first couple of names that really stood out on this list, I'm going to be going in chronological order, starting with the oldest book. Before we get started, I want to know, what have you read from the books that I'm highlighting in this video? Or if you go to the website, if you go to the Library of Congress and check out this list, will you come back and tell me some of the books that you've read, or maybe the books that you're surprised that have made the list? I would also like to know if you've read one of these books and would recommend it. I'm, again, going to only be touching on the books that I either know well, have read, or have some sort of intimate relationship with, meaning that it's on my TBR or it's on my shelf in some way. I would love to know how much of the list you've read, and if you could please leave me a comment about that down below, I would really, really appreciate it. The first book on the list that I have read and I know something about is Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which was published in 1820. According to the note, there's a little note about why each book made the list, which is wonderful. And according to the note, this became really popular outside of the United States. It was written by an American author, but it was very popular both inside and outside of the United States. And that was one of the first times that this had happened. All right, the next book that I have read, but it's been some time. I've read it when I was a child. So it's Frederick Douglass, The Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass, which is by Frederick Douglass. Sorry about the jumpy title. Published in 1845. This is one of the reason why it made the list is because it was a very popular and widely read biography about somebody who grew up enslaved. He doesn't end up enslaved. Frederick Douglass very famously learns how to read, which becomes a huge stepping stone for his success later in life. It's an excellent book if you've never read it. Another one, Edgar Allan Poe, and it is his work, Tales, so I'm guessing it's a collected work. I've read a lot of Edgar Allan Poe before, also published in 1845, and this set the groundwork for mystery and arguably, according to the note, science fiction. We've arrived at the first book that I own, so Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, published in 1950. And this was a widely read book that inspired 19th century romanticism in the United States, in America. And so this is a very important book. One that I had on my TBR a few months ago, but my to-be-read pile. But I never did read it, so I would like to get to this soon. The next one in 1851, and it has stuck around as just one that remains in popular culture today, not surprisingly, and that is Moby-Dick by Herman Melville, published in 1851. I have yet to read this. This has made it on a couple of my videos as a book that I would like to tackle sooner rather than later. I don't know if this year is the year of Moby-Dick, but it did make the list. One book that I would like to read this year with Sandy from Miss Reads a Lot, who has a wonderful channel. I will leave her link down below, is Henry David Thoreau's Walden, or Life in the Woods, and that was published in 1854. So Walden actually had a huge influence on modern conservation and environmental movements. Again, one that isn't a very important book, and I would like to read it if I have the time. The next book I do own, and I read parts of it, but it makes the list because of its style and the themes that are tackled within, and that is Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, first published in 1855. So glad to see this on here, though I'm not super familiar with Whitman's poetry. Louisa May Alcott, Little Women, published in 1868. This is a childhood favorite of mine. Funnily, one of my dearest friends in real life tried to read this, and it took him over a year because he thought it was just so terrible. That always just tickles me. Very intelligent and smart friend of mine, and yet it took him a year and a half to read. So I always thought that was quite funny. The next book that I have read is Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which I read in college. First published in 1884. Known for his satirical and humorous writing and his writing on themes about American life. Emily Dickinson's poetry makes the list. First published in 1890. Her idiosyncratic structure and rhyming schemes have inspired later poets. So for her unique style and rhyme schemes is why she made the list. The following book is one of my father's favorites, and it is Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, which was published in 1895. And it is about the American Civil War. I read the book, but I remember more about the character in the book. I read this years ago. I remember more about the character in the book and not about the themes of the Civil War, so it's probably one that I should revisit. The next one, no surprise, L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful World of Oz, first published in 1900. I read this last year. I was reading Wicked, by Gregory Maguire, and I wanted to read the book that Wicked was based on, and so I read The Wizard of Oz at the same time, and it was really interesting. Gregory Maguire does stick to some of the same ideas that Baum stuck with, but he definitely takes a lot of liberties, which is great. I actually didn't love The Wizard of Oz as much as I thought I would love it. The Wizard of Oz apparently made the list because it is the first fantasy written by an American to enjoy immediate success upon publication. Well, isn't that nice? Another one that I've read, Jack London's A Call of the Wild, published in 1903, which talks about the mistreatment and the treatment of dog sledding in the Yukon, which is a really powerful book, very, very well written. As the list gets more modern, I tend to have owned or read the books there. So the next one is My Antonia by Willa Cather, one that I have not read, originally published in 1918, that made the list because it explores the immigrant experience and women's issues. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, first published in 1925. I read this some years ago. This is a very pretty copy that has like gold edges and just this sort of soft, very beautiful cover. And yeah, not in perfect condition, but we're not looking for perfection here. Fitzgerald's prose is just stunning. I just remember just being mesmerized more by his writing style than the story within these pages. Maybe that's not a good thing. Okay, another book that I really don't want to read, but it has made the list and I do own it, but this is Tidwell's book. We'll say that. It's Tidwell's book. And that is The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. I read Faulkner for the first time last year, and I did not enjoy his writing style or his themes. So people say that this is a masterpiece. Well, that's great for me. Okay, so this was first published in 1929. It's set in the South, and it made the list because of its mostly stream of consciousness narration style. Stream of consciousness narration style. Is that the way? Yeah, that's the right way to say it. So anyways, The Sound and the Fury, not one that I've read, and I don't know how excited I am to pick it up, but I have it. It's here. It's in front of me, and it made this wonderful list. One book that tickled me that it made the list was The Joy of Cooking by Irma Rombauer, first published in 1931. It's one of the most popular and most American cookbooks that has ever been printed, published, released, and probably is still continued to use today. I don't own a copy though. The next book is Margaret Mitchell's Gone with the Wind, which I just finished a few days ago. And I still have a review that I promised you all, but I still haven't got to. But I'm going to actually read their little blurb. It's very short, and I thought what they said on it was great. So it says, the most popular romance novel of all time was the basis for the most popular movie of all time in today's dollars. So Margaret Mitchell's book, Gone with the Wind, is set in the South during the Civil War and won both the Pulitzer and the National Book Award, and it remains popular despite charges that its author had a blind eye regarding the horrors of slavery. I would completely agree with that last part. Margaret Mitchell definitely has a blind and romanticized version of the South and slavery, most of which I did feel like I picked up quite a bit on because I live in the South, and some of the references were talking directly about my area or areas that I've been to, and there is this sort of hazy, rose-colored glasses type of look at the South and the way that their life was. And it is incredibly, the whole novel is very, very romanticized. So I really appreciated what they said about Gone with the Wind. Ooh, not surprisingly, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, also published in 1936. It's one of those books that my parents reference a lot, and you learn little skills, like when somebody says their name, like, hi, I'm George, you would say, me, as I've just met George, would say, hi, George, because not only does it help you remember their name, but the other person loves to hear their name on someone else's lips. And so Dale Carnegie was the person who really kind of headed just the simple manners of winning people over to like you. And again, it was one that my parents talked quite a bit about in my household. I'm sure we owned a copy growing up. Ooh, the next one is actually on my list to read this year, and it is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, first published in 1937. And this is regarded as a masterpiece, which I really do want to get to. I just keep on telling myself when I have a minute, I'll read it. And then I had a minute and I read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye instead of Their Eyes Were Watching God. So she's going to have to wait a little bit longer, but I know that I'm going to be reading this year if everything works out well. Alcoholics Anonymous made the list, which kind of made me laugh in a weird way, which was first published in 1939. Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, I haven't read that, also published in 1939. Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bells Toll, published in 1940. Okay, one book that I don't have with me, but I do own it, and I read it a couple of years ago, and it is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, published in 1949. I loved this book. It was enormously popular, it said, which is one of the reasons why it made the list. I read this book because I was noticing that a lot of books written by younger women in the last decade or 2 decades almost always made reference to A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, that somehow A Tree Grows in Brooklyn had influence over the lives of young women who are writing in the last 10 to 20 years. And when you see that pattern over and over again, I was like, I need to read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn and see what this is all about. And I did read it, and it is about a very, very, very poor family living in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that is really just shares a very difficult life. And that difficult life is both hard to read, but then also there are these moments where the family is, the Nolan family, which is our main family, that they'll have this moment where they're at peace, they have a win, and when those moments come about in the book, they feel so well deserved and well earned as a reader, because the family just really, really struggles throughout Frances Nolan's childhood, Franny's childhood. who is our main protagonist. I hope I got that right. But just a beautiful coming of age story, and one that I would encourage anyone to read. One book that I was so excited to see that made the list was Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown. It has been noted to be the perfect bedtime story. I love this book for the colors and the imagery. So really, Clement Hurd, is that right? Hurd? Clement Hurd is my hero in this book, but I do think that Margaret Wise Brown sort of deconstructing bedtime stories by saying goodbye to everything in the room and having this sort of soft rhythmic playfulness in the book is just brilliant. I love this book. Okay, J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, which was first published in 1951. I own this, I read half of it, and I could not stand our protagonist, which I know, Holden Caulfield, right? I know he's known to be just a little snot. And he was a little snot for me, and I couldn't stand him, and I didn't finish the book. Maybe I'll go back and reread it. I don't know. We'll see. Jury's still out on that one. Do you like The Catcher in the Rye? Another one that I'm excited to, that has made the list is E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. First published in 1952. This is one of the best-selling paperbacks of all time, or it is the best-selling paperback for children of all time, according to this 2013 exhibit by the Library of Congress. So yeah, really, I mean, wonderful story. I could see why it's so popular, and again, I'm so glad that people continue to read it today. I went a little bit out of order, but that's totally normal for me, so I'm going to kind of slip this in where it's supposed to go. But Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 made the list, and it made it partly because of the perspective it brings about the United States and what it would look like to be in the United States where there are no books and where books are outlawed. And I read this just a few months ago with the Eclectic Book Club, a book club that I run with David Wiley. And it was a very, very good book, very thought-provoking. And I am glad that it's still being read in high schools today. Oh no, okay, one book that I'm just, like, embarrassed that we own because I have no interest in reading it, and that is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. Have you read this? Did you like it? Please let me know. So this book has a negative view on government and capitalism and has high moral objectives. I'm not interested in reading this book at all. My husband bought it because a friend of his raved about it, and then we bought it, or he bought it, and have investigated the book since, and I don't think either of us want to read it. So this is probably one I could ask to unhaul soon. Another book that I'm actually shocked that I don't own, The Cat in the Hat. First published in 1957, it made the list because of the millions and millions of copies of Dr. Seuss books that have been sold since. Yeah, very shocked that I don't. I might have it on a little, I might own this book and it's just stuck in a bookshelf somewhere, but that's not a good sign that I can't remember if we own it or not. I did go looking for it and I couldn't find it. One of my favorite books of all time made the list, which makes me happy, and that is Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. First published in 1960, I gave my copy to my mom. I absolutely adore this book. It was immediately successful, and it made the list because it has one of the most incredible characters of all time, Atticus Finch, who really represents tolerance and justice and doing the right thing when other people tell you not to. And that is one of the reasons why it made the list. Another book that I own, and I don't know if I will ever read, and that is Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. This was gifted to me because I was really interested at one point into getting into classic science fiction, and I never did, but it's supposed to be one of the best sci-fi books ever written. Yeah, that's all I have to say about it. It defined the genre. That's what I'll say. It defined the genre. Next on the list that I own is Ezra Jack Keats' Snowy Day, first published in 1962. Keats was a Jewish author, but this book is most noted because it has a African-American main character, and that's the first time that a full color picture book had an African-American main protagonist, which is surprising, but that's the reason why it made the list. Again, one of the books that has shaped America. I think it's fascinating that now in 1962, according to the list, that it is in that moment that we see an African-American main character in a picture book. Fascinating. Another book that I don't own but wish I did was Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, first published in 1963, won because of its popularity, or made the list rather because of its popularity, his character of Max, and what he did for the picture book genre. We've come to another one that I've read. I actually just read this last month, and it is James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. I'm going to read you the blurb that goes with it. It's so good. So it says, one of the most important books ever published on race relations, James Baldwin's 2-essay work comprises a letter written to his nephew on the role of race in United States history and a discussion on how religion and race influence each other. Baldwin's angry prose is balanced by his overall belief that love and understanding can overcome strife. The next book is another one that I own, but I don't know if I'll read because I started it and it scared the living daylights out of me. And it's Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. This is one that created a new genre, which is like literary nonfiction, or the nonfiction novel is what they call it on the list. Yeah, but I think of Truman Capote as the grandfather of true crime writing, and I can definitely see the importance of this book. All right, and the last book, the most modern of these, is going to be Toni Morrison's Beloved. Interestingly, I'm going to be reading this Beloved this month with Elle Thinks. Apparently, the New York Times named this as the best work of fiction in the past 25 years. So that's very, very significant. All right, so that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this wasn't too disjointed. Editing Shelley might have a little bit of work to do, but I'm hoping it comes off as fluid as possible. And I hope you enjoyed spending this time with me. I'm really curious as to what you've read from this list. It's a really neat one. I just love that the Library of Congress continues to put together even online exhibits for everyone to enjoy while we're not doing so much in person, while we're not, visiting museums in person. The Library of Congress has our back, and so there's a lot to explore on there. And this was one article, one exhibit, one piece of information that I wanted to bring to you all and share and talk about. So thank you for letting me do that. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.